Guys, if you're planning on taking the REG exam in 2025, you need to watch this video. It could potentially save you months of studying the wrong information and thousands in wasted study materials. Make sure to watch to the end so that you're covered in all areas of the REG exam and find out how you can save big by using Breezy CPA Review. Let's get into it. So the CPA exam requires all candidates to pass 3 core exam sections and 1 discipline exam section of the candidate's choosing. The uniform CPA exam is designed according to the AICPA exam blueprints, which we're looking at now. The core exam sections assess the knowledge and the skills that newly licensed CPAs need in their role to protect the public interest. The discipline exam sections assess the knowledge and the skills in the respective discipline domain applicable to the newly licensed CPA in their role to protect that public interest. The 3 core exam sections are each 4 hours long, and they are odd, FAR, and REG. And the 3 discipline exam sections are also each 4 hours long, and they are BAR, ISC, and TCP. So taking a look at the table down here, we can see our 3 core exam sections, odd, FAR, REG, and our 3 discipline exam sections, BAR, ISC, and TCP. And we can see that this is broken down by section time, multiple choice questions, and task-based simulations. We can see that all the exams are 4 hours long. For the multiple choice questions, this varies by exam. We can see that odd has 78, FAR has 50, REG has 72, BAR 50, ISC 82, and TCP has 68. And as far as the task-based simulations, we can see that odd has 7, FAR has 7, REG has 8, BAR has 7, ISC has 6, and TCP has 7 task-based simulations. So all the CPA exam sections are broken down again by multiple choice questions and task-based simulations, and the weighting for both of these is generally 50-50 for each exam. So we can see here for odd 50-50. So the weight of the multiple choice questions on the exam is going to be 50% of your score. The weight for the task-based simulations is also going to be 50% of your score. And that applies to almost every exam except ISC, where the weight of the multiple choice questions is 60% of your score and the weight of the task-based simulations is 40% of your score. Moving on to this table down here, we can see that each section of the CPA exam is broken up into 5 different testlets. So Testlet 1 is going to be multiple choice questions. Testlet 2, again, multiple choice questions. Testlets 3, 4, and 5 are going to be your task-based simulations. So we can see that for Testlet 1 and 2, whatever amount of multiple choice questions there are for that section of the exam, for instance, for odd, we have 78 multiple choice questions. We can see that's broken up 50-50. So 39 of those are going to be on the first testlet, 39 are going to be on the second testlet, and that applies to all of the exams. So for instance, for BAR, we have 50 multiple choice questions, 25 are going to be on the first, 25 are going to be on the second. And for the remaining 3 testlets, the task-based simulations are going to be broken down accordingly. So for example, for odd, we're going to have 2 on the first, 3 on the second, and 2 on the last. So getting into what you'll need to know for the taxation and regulation section of the CPA examination, this section is going to test a candidate's knowledge and skills related to the U.S. ethics and professional responsibilities related to tax practice, related to U.S. business law, and related to the U.S. federal tax compliance for individuals and entities, which will focus on reoccurring and routine transactions. The assessment of federal tax compliance will focus on a CPA candidate's role in both the preparation and the review of tax returns, and this will incorporate data and technology concepts, as well as applied research with a focus on reviewing and using excerpts of source materials. So the content organization for the taxation and regulation exam is organized based on content area, on content group, and on content topic. So taking a look at the content allocation for the reg section here, we have 5 different areas that the exam is going to be testing you on. So for example, area 1 is going to be ethics, professional responsibility, and federal tax procedures, and this is going to be 10 to 20% of the exam. Content area 2 is going to be business law, and this is going to be 15 to 25% of the exam. Content area 3 is federal taxation of property transactions. This is 5 to 15%. Content area 4 is federal taxation for individuals. This is 22 to 32% of the exam. And content area 5 is federal taxation of entities, and this is 23 to 33% of the exam. So it's very helpful to look at the AICPA Blueprint here and understand that on the exam, you're very likely to see taxation for individuals and federal taxation for entities, because these are going to potentially be almost 60% of the exam here, 32% for individuals, 33% for entities. And then business law also has a large portion of the allocation, which potentially could be 25% of your exam. So this helps in understanding what you need to focus on when you're studying, because the likelihood that you're not going to see questions for taxation of individuals or taxations of entities is very unlikely, because it makes up a large portion of the allocation of the reg exam. So going here to Area 1, Ethics, Professional Responsibility, and Federal Tax Procedures, we can see that for Area 1, this is going to cover ethics and responsibilities in tax practice, licensing and disciplinary systems, federal tax procedures, and legal duties and responsibilities. Area 2 of the reg exam focuses on business law concepts and the legal implications of business transactions. This area includes government regulations of businesses, as well as areas of agency, contracts, debtor and creditor relationships, and business structures. Area 3 of the reg exam focuses on property transactions for individuals and entities, and this area includes the basis of an asset that is purchased for the use of trade or business, the basis of an asset converted for personal to business use, the basis of assets held by individuals, the basis of intangible assets, and cost recovery, including depreciation and amortization of assets held for use in a trade or a business. Area 4 of the reg exam covers federal tax compliance related to routine and reoccurring transactions and issues for individuals, and this area includes the inclusion and exclusion of amounts for the purposes of calculating gross income, adjusted gross income, and taxable income, reporting on the income from pass-through entities, and loss limitations, filing statuses available for each taxpayer, and the role of tax credits and safe harbor requirements for estimated taxes. Area 5 of the reg exam covers federal tax compliance related to routine and reoccurring transactions and issues for entities, and this area includes the requirement adjustments to book income to determine taxable income, the computation of taxable income for C corporations, the determination of ordinary business income and loss and separately stated items for S corporations and partnerships, and the classification options for limited liability companies, and the eligibility and election of S corporation status and the types of tax-exempt organizations. Some important assumptions that you should be keenly aware of while you're studying and while you're taking your exam is that candidates will not be tested on their knowledge of specific tax rate percentages, amounts, or limitations that are indexed to inflation. So don't waste too much time studying these specific tax rate percentages, amounts, or limitations that are indexed to inflation, because those will not be tested on the exam. What you do need to be aware of is that absent of any stated assumptions, candidates should assume that the transactions or events that are referenced in a question occur in the current year, and they should apply the most recent provisions of the tax law in accordance with the timing specified by the CPA exam policy on new pronouncements. So make sure you understand that you are not going to be tested on specific tax rate percentages, amounts, or limitations that are indexed by inflation. So taking a look at the skill framework for the regulation exam, this is based on something called Bloom's taxonomy, and this is going to test the various skill levels that you'll need to know for the areas of the exam. So this is going to vary from remembering and understanding all the way up to evaluation. So we have remembering and understanding, application of principles, the analysis of principles, and the evaluation of principles. And these are the various skill levels that you'll need to know in order to respond to the questions on the exam. So for the remembering and understanding, this is mainly going to be concentrated in Area 1 and Area 2 of the reg exam. And the application and analysis skills, these are going to be primarily tested in Areas 3, 4, and 5. And these three areas are going to contain more of the day-to-day tasks of the CPA that are expected to be performed related to the preparation and review of tax returns. Whereas for the remembering and understanding, these two areas are going to be more related to the general ethics, professional responsibilities, and business law knowledge that a CPA candidate needs to know. So taking a look at a quick summary of what we just went over, the content area and the skill allocation. So for the content area, again, we have 5 different content areas for the reg exam, and these are the weights that are associated with those content areas. So again, ethics, professional responsibility, federal tax procedures, business law, federal taxation of property transactions, federal taxation for individuals, and federal taxation of entities. And again, the weights associated with these 10 to 20%, 15 to 25, 5 to 15, 22 to 32, and 23 to 33. And as far as the skill allocation, we can see here that you have remembering and understanding, which is going to be 25 to 35% of the content on the reg exam. You have the application of principles, which is going to be 35 to 45%. This is the largest section here. You're going to need to know how to apply the various principles related to taxation. And you have the analysis section, which is going to be 25 to 35% of the exam weight. And evaluation, they do not include that as part of the reg exam. If you're interested in getting your own copy of the AICPA blueprints that we're looking at here, you're welcome to visit us at breezycpa.com, and we have a free version that you can download on our website. You can also visit the AICPA website, and they have a downloadable version for you there as well. One thing that many CPA candidates don't realize is that whatever CPA review course you choose to utilize for studying for the CPA exam, every CPA review course follows the AICPA blueprints. The AICPA blueprint is the standard for what is going to be on the exam. So every CPA review program follows these same AICPA blueprints. Now, whether you choose to use Breezy CPA or a different CPA review course, that's up to you. Of course, we would appreciate it if you chose Breezy CPA. And if you do, please use Breezy 20 to get 20% off your order at checkout. Breezy CPA, we've helped over 25,000 students successfully study for the CPA exam using the Breezy method. And you can see here that we have our study guide for the reg exam. We have our cram course for the reg exam, and these all follow the AICPA blueprint. So you can see here that we have ethics and responsibilities, regulations governing practice before the Internal Revenue Service. Here we have regulations governing practice before the IRS, and there's a video for that. Then you have simulations, and we have a test bank of over 5,000 questions for you to go through with explanations and responses for each question to make sure that you understand the concepts thoroughly. You can see here we have licensing, or we have Internal Revenue Code regulations related to tax return preparers, a video for that with simulations and questions. Next, we have licensing and disciplinary systems, a video for that with simulations and questions, and so on and so forth. We go through the entire AICPA blueprint with detailed videos, questions, and simulations to make sure that you are prepared for your exam when that exam day comes. So whatever CPA review course you choose to use, we hope that you pass your exams. If you choose to use Breezy CPA, we of course would appreciate it, and make sure to use Breezy 20 to get 20% off your order. So getting into the detailed breakdown of the reg exam, we're going to start off with Area 1, Ethics, Professional Responsibilities, and Federal Tax Procedures. This is 10 to 20% of the weight of the exam, what you will be seeing, the content that you'll be seeing on the exam. And we're going to start off here with the content area and ethics and responsibilities in tax practice, regulations governing practice before the Internal Revenue Service. And here you're going to see that you're going to have these skill areas that we spoke about, the remembering and understanding, the application, the analysis, and evaluation is not part of the reg exam. So here you have the representative tasks for regulations governing practice before the IRS. You're going to need to be able to recall the regulations governing practice before the Internal Revenue Service. You're going to need to be able to apply those regulations governing practice before the IRS, given specific scenarios. For Area 2 here, you're going to have the Internal Revenue Code and regulations related to tax return preparers, where you'll need to recall who is a tax return preparer. You're going to need to recall situations that would result in tax return preparer penalties. And you're going to need to be able to apply potential tax return preparer penalties given specific scenarios. And you can see here that for these first 2 areas here, they're largely based in remembering and understanding these concepts and applying these concepts. You will not need to analyze these concepts. You're going to need to remember and understand, and you're going to need to be able to apply these concepts related to ethics and responsibilities in tax practice. Moving on to licensing and disciplinary systems, here you're going to need to understand and explain the role and authority of the State Board of Accountancy. Next, we have federal tax procedures related to audits, appeals, and the judicial process, where you'll need to explain the audit and appeals process as it relates to tax matters. You'll need to explain the different levels of the judicial process as it relates to tax matters. Next, we have substantiation and disclosure, where you'll need to summarize the requirements for the appropriate disclosure of a tax return position. You'll need to recall the requirements to report foreign bank accounts. You'll need to identify situations in which disclosure of tax return positions is required, and you'll need to identify whether substantiation is sufficient given specific scenarios. Continuing with Area 1, we have taxpayer penalties, where you'll need to recall situations that would result in taxpayer penalties relating to tax returns. You'll need to identify taxpayer penalties given specific scenarios. Next, we have authoritative hierarchy, where you'll need to recall the appropriate hierarchy of authority for tax purposes. Moving on to legal duties and responsibilities, we have common law duties and liabilities to clients and third parties, where you'll need to summarize the tax return preparer's common law duties and liabilities to clients and third parties. You'll also need to identify situations which result in violations of tax return preparers' common law duties and liabilities to clients and third parties. Next, we have privileged communication, confidentiality, and privacy acts, where you'll need to summarize the rules regarding privileged communication as they relate to tax practice, and identify situations in which communications regarding the tax practice are considered privileged. Continuing on to Area 2, business law. Here, this is going to be 15 to 25% of what you will see on the exam. First, we have agency, the authority of agents and principals. Here, you'll need to be able to recall the types of agent authority. You'll need to be able to identify whether an agency relationship exists given a specific scenario. Next, we have duties and liabilities of agents and principals, where you'll need to explain the various duties and liabilities of both the agent and the principal. And you'll need to be able to identify the duty of liability of an agent or principal given a specific scenario. Next, we have contracts and the formation of contracts, where you'll need to summarize the elements of a contract formation between parties. You'll need to identify whether a valid contract was formed given a specific scenario, and you'll need to be able to identify different types of contracts. Next, we have performance and discharge, where you'll explain the rules related to the fulfillment of performance obligations necessary for an executed contract. And you'll need to explain the different ways in which a contract can be discharged. You'll need to identify whether a contract has been discharged given specific scenarios, and you'll need to identify whether both parties to a contract have fulfilled their performance obligation given a specific scenario. Next, we have breach and remedies, where you'll need to summarize the different remedies available to a party for a breach of contract. You'll need to identify situations involving breach of contracts, and you'll need to identify a remedy available to a party for a breach of contract given specific scenarios. Continuing on with Area 2, we have debtor and creditor relationships, where you'll need to explain the rights, duties, and liabilities of debtors, creditors, and guarantors. You'll have to explain the rights of the debtors and the creditors and how to properly distribute in bankruptcy proceedings. You'll need to explain the difference between secured and unsecured creditors and the requirements needed to perfect a security interest. And you'll need to identify the rights, duties, and liabilities of debtors and creditors and guarantors given specific scenarios. Next, we have federal laws and regulations, where you'll need to summarize the federal laws and regulations for qualified healthcare plans, including required business mandates and premium tax credits. You'll need to explain federal laws and regulations related to employment taxes. You'll need to recall the factors used in determining classification of an employee versus an independent contractor. You'll need to recall the types of bankruptcy and requirements for discharge of indebtedness. You'll need to be able to summarize the federal laws and regulations prohibiting bribery of foreign government officials, and you'll need to identify compliance issues with various laws and regulations. The last area of business law, we have business structure, where you'll look at the selection and formation of business entities and related operation and termination. So you'll need to summarize the processes for the formation and termination of various business entities. You'll need to be able to summarize the legal characteristics of various business entities. Next, we have rights, duties, legal obligations, and authority of owners and management. So you'll need to be able to summarize the rights, duties, and legal obligations and the authority of owners and management. And you'll need to be able to identify the rights, duties, and legal obligations and authority of owners and management given specific scenarios. Continuing on to Area 3, we have the federal taxation of property transactions. This is going to make up 5 to 15% of what you will see on the exam. So the basis of assets, you'll need to be able to calculate the tax basis of an asset purchased for the use in a trade or a business. You'll need to be able to calculate the tax basis of an asset that's converted from personal to business use. You'll need to be able to calculate the tax basis of property received as a gift or as an inheritance. You'll need to be able to calculate the tax basis of stock acquired through a wash sale, and you'll need to be able to calculate the basis of intangible assets, including organization costs, startup costs, and loan costs. Next, we have cost recovery related to depreciation and amortization, where you'll need to calculate the tax depreciation for tangible business property. You'll need to be able to determine property eligible for Section 179 deductions. You'll need to be able to calculate tax amortization for intangible assets. You'll need to be able to review a tax depreciation and amortization schedule. And you'll need to be able to review and resolve discrepancies identified by automated diagnostic and validation checks. Next, we have Area 4, which is one of the larger sections of the exam, the federal taxation of individuals, making up 22 to 32% of what you'll see on the exam. First, we have gross income, inclusions and exclusions. So you'll need to calculate the amounts that should be included on an individual's gross income as reported on Form 1040. You'll need to be able to calculate the capital gain that should be included on an individual's gross income on the 1040. You'll need to be able to calculate the amounts that should be excluded from an individual's gross income on the 1040. You'll need to be able to calculate the income reported in the year of death for a deceased individual on the 1040. You'll need to be able to review Form 1040 of the U.S. individual income tax return, and you'll need to be able to review and resolve discrepancies identified by automated diagnostic and validation checks to ensure the completeness and accuracy of gross income reported on a Form 1040 form. Next, we have reporting of items from pass-through entities, where you'll need to use information provided from pass-through entities in which an individual has ownership interest to report an owner's share of ordinary business income or loss and separately stated items on an individual's tax return. Continuing on with Area 4, federal taxation of individuals, we have adjustments and deductions to arrive at adjusted gross income and taxable income, where you'll need to identify adjustments allowed in the calculation of adjusted gross income given specific scenarios. You'll need to identify itemized deductions allowed in the calculation of taxable income. You'll need to calculate the qualified business income deduction for federal income tax purposes. You'll need to be able to review Form 1040 and supporting documentation. You'll need to be able to review and resolve discrepancies identified by automated diagnostic and validation checks. Moving on to loss limitations, you'll need to be able to calculate the net loss tax allowed on the sale of capital property, included netting of capital gains and losses and capital loss carryforwards. And you'll need to be able to calculate the amount of ordinary business loss allowed for an individual. And you'll need to be able to calculate the disallowed for tax purposes, such as for hobby, wash sales, or sale of personal use assets. Continuing on with taxation of individuals, we have filing status, where you'll need to recall taxpayer filing status for tax purposes. You'll need to recall the relationships meeting the definition of dependent for the purposes of determining taxpayer filing status. And you'll need to identify taxpayer filing status for the tax purpose given a specific scenario. Next, we have computation of tax and credits, where you'll need to recall and define the difference between refundable and non-refundable tax credits. You'll need to recall and define the safe harbor requirements for individual estimated tax payments to avoid penalties. And you'll need to be able to calculate the tax liability based on an individual's taxable income. Next, we have Area 5, federal taxation of entities. Again, a heavily tested area on the reg exam. From 23 to 33% of the exam is going to be based on the taxation of entities. We have the difference between book and tax income and loss. So you'll need to be able to identify permanent versus temporary differences to be reported on Schedule M3. You'll need to be able to calculate book and tax differences to be reported on Schedule M1 and M3. You'll need to be able to review an entity's adjusted book trial balance and supporting documentation. And you'll need to review a C corporation's adjusted book trial balance and supporting documentation. So for C corporations, we have computation of taxable income, tax liability, and allowable credits. Here you'll need to calculate taxable income for a C corporation. You'll need to calculate the current year net operating or capital loss for a C corporation and the limitations. You'll need to be able to calculate the credits allowed as a reduction to tax for a C corporation. Moving on to state and local tax issues, you'll need to be able to define the general concept and rationale of nexus with respect to state and local taxation. You'll need to be able to define the general concept and rationale of appointment and allocation with respect to state and local taxation. And you'll need to be able to calculate state taxable income using applicable factors given a specific scenario. Next, we have taxation of S corporations, so eligibility and election for S corporations. You'll need to recall the eligible shareholders for an S corporation for tax purposes, recall the S corporation eligibility requirements for tax purposes, and identify situations in which S corporation status would be revoked or terminated for tax purposes. Next, we have the determination of ordinary business income or loss and separately stated items. So you'll need to be able to calculate the ordinary business income or loss and separately stated items for an S corporation. You'll need to be able to calculate the impact of current year operations on an S corporation's accumulated adjustment account. And you'll need to be able to review Form 1120S. You'll need to be able to review and resolve discrepancies identified by automated diagnostic and validation checks. Moving on to basis of shareholder interest, you'll need to calculate a shareholder stock basis in an S corporation for tax purposes, and you'll need to be able to calculate the changes in a shareholder's debt basis in an S corporation resulting from current year repayment of debt. Next, we have partnerships. So determination of the ordinary business income or loss and separately stated items for partnerships. You'll need to be able to calculate the ordinary business income or loss and separately stated items for a partnership for tax purposes. You'll need to be able to review Federal Form 1065 for U.S. Partnerships. You'll need to be able to review and resolve discrepancies identified by automated diagnostic and validation checks for partnerships. Moving on to basis of partnership interest, you'll need to be able to calculate the partner's basis in the partnership for tax purposes. Next, we have limited liability companies, LLCs, where you'll need to recall the tax classification options for a limited liability company for tax purposes. And lastly, we have tax-exempt organizations, where you'll need to recall the different types of tax-exempt organizations for tax purposes. That concludes our walkthrough of the AICPA blueprints for taxation and regulation, the reg section of the CPA exam. If you want the rest of the videos for the other sections of the CPA exam, we have them available on our YouTube channel. Just visit Breezy CPA and you'll find them there. They will also be suggested after this video by YouTube suggestions, so you can click on one of those videos after this video finishes. We wish you the best of luck in studying for your exams, and we hope to see you soon. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. If you're interested in learning more about accounting, taxes, or becoming a CPA, visit us at breezycpa.com for courses. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.